"I'll give you $50,000 if you fix this," laughed the millionaire woman at the little girl and her single dad, until the engine roared to life. Before anything else, if this video finds you well, wherever you are, let me know how it made you feel at the end. The December rain hammered against the cracked windshield of Jake Morrison's 15-year-old pickup truck as it wheezed to a stop in front of the towering glass monument that was Harrison Industries. Steam hissed from under the hood like an angry beast, and Jake's heart sank deeper than it already was. His 5-year-old daughter Emma pressed her tiny nose against the passenger window, her breath fogging the glass as she stared up at the gleaming corporate tower. "Daddy, is that where the mean lady lives?" Emma's voice was barely above a whisper, her small hand clutching the worn teddy bear that hadn't left her side since the divorce 4 years ago. Jake's jaw tightened. Mean lady. If only it were that simple. Victoria Harrison wasn't just mean. She was the razor-sharp CEO who'd been systematically destroying small contractors like him across the entire state. Her company had grown from a modest construction firm to a billion-dollar empire by crushing the competition, and Jake's little contracting business was next on her list. "She's not mean, sweetheart. She's just—" Jake searched for words a 5-year-old could understand while his mind raced with desperation. His bank account showed $247. The truck payment was 3 weeks overdue. Emma's daycare fees were mounting. And now this. The engine had finally given up just as he was about to make the most important pitch of his life. The security guard at the lobby desk looked Jake up and down with barely concealed disgust as they entered. Emma's sneakers squeaked against the marble floor, leaving tiny puddles from the rain. Jake's work clothes, the only decent ones he had left, were damp and wrinkled, making him look exactly like what he was, a desperate man out of options. "Jake Morrison for the 3 o'clock meeting," he said, trying to inject confidence into his voice. The guard's expression suggested Jake had just asked to marry the CEO. 23rd floor. Elevators that way. As they rode up in the gleaming elevator, Jake's reflection stared back at him from the polished walls. 32 years old, prematurely graying hair, and worry lines that made him look a decade older. This wasn't how he'd imagined his life would look when he'd started Morrison Contracting 6 years ago, full of dreams and determination. The divorce had changed everything. Sarah had taken half of everything, including his confidence. But worse than the financial devastation was watching Emma grow up, seeing her father struggle, seeing the fear in her eyes when the phone rang with another overdue notice, another threat. "Mr. Morrison?" A receptionist's voice cut through his thoughts. "Ms. Harrison will see you now." Jake's palms were sweating as he approached the massive office doors. This was it. His one shot at landing the Harrison Industries contract that could save his business, his home, and his daughter's future. Through the glass walls he could see her, Victoria Harrison, the woman whose face graced business magazines, whose net worth exceeded most small countries' GDP. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe 38, with platinum blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes the color of winter ice. Her suit probably cost more than Jake made in 3 months. She didn't look up from her computer when they entered. "You're late," she said, her voice carrying the kind of authority that could make grown men weep. "I'm sorry, my truck. I don't care about your transportation problems." Victoria's eyes finally lifted from the screen, scanning Jake with the same interest she might show roadkill. Then her gaze fell on Emma, and something flickered across her face. Annoyance, maybe, or something deeper. "You brought a child to a business meeting?" Emma stepped closer to Jake, her small hand finding his. The sight of his daughter trying to protect him from this corporate predator sent a surge of desperate courage through Jake's chest. "My babysitter canceled last minute. Emma won't be any trouble, I promise." Victoria's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "Mr. Morrison, do you understand who you're dealing with? I'm worth $50 million. I own properties in 12 states. My decisions affect thousands of jobs." She leaned back in her leather chair, her smile predatory. "And you want me to give a major contract to a man who can't even arrange childcare or arrive on time?" Jake felt heat rise in his cheeks, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Ms. Harrison, I know my company is small, but quality doesn't depend on size. I've been doing this work for 8 years, and I've never had an unsatisfied customer. My bids are competitive and my work is impeccable. Your work is irrelevant if you can't handle the logistics of a simple meeting." Victoria stood, her heels clicking against the marble floor as she walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. "Do you see this view, Mr. Morrison? This is what success looks like. This is what organization and discipline create." Emma's grip on Jake's hand tightened, and he could feel her trembling slightly. The little girl had always been sensitive to tension, and the Arctic atmosphere in this office was enough to make anyone uncomfortable. "I understand you've had some personal difficulties recently," Victoria continued, her back still turned. "Divorce can be quite devastating to a man's focus. Perhaps you should consider whether running a business is the right choice for someone in your situation." The words hit Jake like physical blows. She'd done her homework, knew about the divorce, probably knew about the financial struggles too. This wasn't just a business meeting, it was a public execution. "My personal life doesn't affect the quality of my work," Jake said, his voice steady despite the storm building inside him. Victoria turned, her smile wider now, more dangerous. "Doesn't it? Your credit score suggests otherwise. Your equipment maintenance records suggest otherwise. The fact that your truck is currently smoking in my parking lot suggests otherwise." Jake's heart pounded. How did she know about the truck? Had she been watching from her window? "Ms. Harrison, I'm here to discuss a business proposal. My company can complete your downtown renovation project for 30% less than your current contractor, and we can do it in half the time." 30% less? Victoria laughed again, the sound echoing off the glass walls. "Mr. Morrison, that's exactly the problem. You're so desperate that you're underbidding projects. That tells me you're either incompetent at estimating costs, or you're planning to cut corners. Neither option inspires confidence." Emma tugged on Jake's sleeve. "Daddy, I need to use the bathroom," she whispered. Victoria's eyes narrowed. "The bathroom is down the hall. But Mr. Morrison, our meeting ends when you walk out that door." Jake looked down at his daughter, then back at Victoria. There was something almost cruel in the way she was forcing him to choose between his child's needs and his business opportunity. "Can we have just 2 minutes?" Jake asked. "Time is money, Mr. Morrison, something you seem to understand poorly." Jake knelt down to Emma's level. "Can you hold it for just a few more minutes, sweetheart? This is really important." Emma nodded bravely, but Jake could see the discomfort in her eyes. The same discomfort he'd been seeing too often lately. The look of a child forced to grow up too fast because of her father's failures. Standing back up, Jake pulled out the proposal he'd spent weeks preparing. "Ms. Harrison, I know I don't look like much right now. I know my truck is old and my clothes aren't expensive. But I'm offering you something your current contractors can't. Personal attention, craftsmanship, and a guarantee that I'll treat your project like it's the most important work I've ever done. Because it is." Victoria walked back to her desk, her expression unreadable. "You said 30% less in half the time. That's impossible unless you're planning to use substandard materials or unsafe labor practices. No shortcuts, no substandard anything. I can do it because I don't have the overhead your current contractor has. I don't have a $50 million salary to pay myself." For the first time since they'd entered the office, Victoria seemed genuinely interested. She leaned forward slightly, her ice blue eyes studying Jake's face as if she were trying to read his soul. "You're that confident in your abilities?" "I'm confident in my desperation, ma'am. Sometimes that's worth more than confidence." Victoria Harrison had built her empire by reading people, by finding their pressure points and exploiting them. Jake Morrison was laid out like an open book, desperate, prideful, and hanging on to the last threads of dignity. It should have been easy to dismiss him, to send him away with the same cold efficiency she used on all the other small-time contractors who wandered into her office with big dreams and small budgets. But something about the way he stood there, protecting his daughter while refusing to back down, irritated her in a way she couldn't quite identify. "Your desperation," she repeated, savoring the word. "That's your selling point? It's honest. Your current contractor has 12 projects running simultaneously. If one runs late, it's no big deal to them. They'll charge you extra. Push back the timeline and you'll pay it because that's how the industry works." Jake's voice grew stronger with each word. "But for me, this project is everything. My daughter's future depends on it, my business depends on it. I won't just do good work, I'll do perfect work because I can't afford not to." Emma shifted beside him, and Jake could sense her growing discomfort. The meeting was taking too long and his 5-year-old daughter was paying the price for his desperation. Victoria noticed too. There was something unsettling about watching a grown man put business before his child's basic needs. It reminded her of someone, though she pushed the memory away before it could fully surface. "Tell me about your biggest project," Victoria said, settling back into her chair. "I want specifics. Timeline, budget, challenges, results." Jake launched into a detailed description of the Morrison Library renovation he'd completed 2 years earlier. His voice carried genuine pride as he described the historical preservation challenges, The way he'd restored 100-year-old woodwork, the custom solutions he'd created for modern accessibility requirements while maintaining historical integrity. Victoria found herself actually listening. Most contractors who pitched to her spoke in generic terms, promising the moon without understanding the technical complexities. Jake Morrison spoke with the specificity of someone who'd actually done the work himself, who understood every nail and board that went into a project. The library project took 6 months and came in 8% under budget, Jake concluded. The Historical Society gave it their Preservation Award that year. Impressive, Victoria admitted, though her tone remained skeptical. But that was a small project. We're talking about a $40 million commercial renovation downtown. The timeline is 18 months and there's zero tolerance for delays or cost overruns. I understand the scale difference. That's why I've already partnered with Thompson Electrical and Martinez Plumbing, both established subcontractors with proven track records on large projects. I'm not trying to do everything myself. I'm trying to coordinate excellence. Victoria stood again, this time walking over to a scale model of the downtown project that occupied one corner of her office. The proposed renovation would transform a neglected 1920s department store into a mixed-use complex with retail, offices, and luxury condominiums. It was her most ambitious project yet, one that would cement Harrison Industries' reputation as a premier development company. This building has sentimental value to me, Victoria said, her voice softer than before. My grandmother worked there in the 1940s, back when it was still a functioning department store. She used to tell me stories about the Christmas displays, the elegant customers, the sense of community it created. Jake moved closer to the model, Emma following beside him. The little girl's eyes widened at the intricate details. Tiny trees, miniature people, even small cars parked along the street. It's beautiful, Emma whispered, momentarily forgetting her discomfort. Victoria's expression softened almost imperceptibly as she watched Emma examine the model with wonder. Do you like it? Emma nodded enthusiastically. It looks like a castle where princesses would shop. A genuine smile flickered across Victoria's face before she caught herself and returned to business mode. Mr. Morrison, sentimental value aside, this project represents the future of Harrison Industries. If it succeeds, we'll likely move into historic renovation as a specialty. If it fails, she didn't need to finish the sentence. It won't fail, Jake said simply. You can't guarantee that. No one can. You're right. But I can guarantee that if it does fail, it won't be because I didn't give everything I had. Victoria returned to her desk and opened a thick folder. Your proposal mentions a 18-month timeline. My current contractor estimates 24 months minimum. They're building and padding because they're juggling multiple projects. I'll have just this one. Every day matters when you're fighting to save your business. Victoria pulled out a detailed breakdown of the current contractor's proposal and spread it across her desk. Randolph Construction has been doing commercial work for 15 years. They've completed 12 projects similar to this one. Their insurance coverage is comprehensive, their bonding is solid, and they have a safety record that's industry-leading. Jake moved closer to the desk, studying the papers. Even from his limited view, he could see the astronomical figures, labor costs that seemed inflated, material costs that included hefty markups, timeline padding that added months to the project. They're charging you $47 million for work that should cost $35 million, Jake said after a moment. And look at this. They're billing premium rates for basic work like demolition and framing. You're paying Mercedes prices for Honda work. Randolph's reputation justifies premium pricing, Victoria replied, but Jake caught a hint of uncertainty in her voice. Their reputation is built on exactly this, overcharging clients who can afford it and delivering adequate work on extended timelines. They know you'll pay because you don't have alternatives. Emma tugged on Jake's sleeve again, more urgently this time. Jake could see tears forming in her eyes as she struggled with her discomfort. His heart broke a little more, watching his daughter suffer for his ambitions. Victoria noticed the exchange. Mr. Morrison, perhaps we should— Please, Jake interrupted. Just 5 more minutes. Emma, sweetheart, can you be brave for Daddy just a little longer? Emma nodded, biting her lip in the way she did when she was trying not to cry. Jake turned back to Victoria with renewed intensity, knowing his window was closing fast. Ms. Harrison, I'm going to tell you something none of your other contractors will tell you. This project isn't just about renovation, it's about transformation. That building has been empty for 8 years. It's become a symbol of urban decay in the downtown district. When you bring it back to life, you're not just creating retail and office space, you're creating hope. Victoria's eyebrows rose slightly. Hope doesn't generate revenue, Mr. Morrison. Doesn't it? Look at the demographics of that neighborhood. Young professionals moving back into the city, families looking for walkable communities, entrepreneurs wanting affordable commercial space. That building isn't just going to serve customers, it's going to create them. For the first time since they'd entered the office, Victoria leaned forward with genuine interest. Explain. The retail space on the ground floor will anchor the district. The office space above will bring daytime foot traffic. The residential units on the top floors will bring nighttime activity. You're not just renovating a building, you're catalyzing an entire neighborhood transformation. Jake pulled out his phone and showed Victoria a series of photos he'd taken around the building site. I've been studying this project for months, not just the construction aspects but the economic impact. There are 6 other property owners in that block who are waiting to see what happens with your project. If it succeeds, they'll invest in renovations too. If it fails, the entire district stays stagnant. Victoria studied the photos, her business mind clearly engaged. You've done considerable research, because I understand what this means. For you, it's one project among many. For that neighborhood, it's everything. For my business, it's survival. Those 3 things align perfectly. Emma shifted again, and this time a small whimper escaped her lips. Jake's resolve cracked. No business opportunity was worth his daughter's suffering. Ms. Harrison, I need to take Emma to the bathroom. I know you said the meeting ends if I leave, but I won't let my daughter suffer for my ambitions. If that costs me this opportunity, so be it. Victoria stared at him for a long moment, something unreadable crossing her face. Mr. Morrison, your daughter's comfort should have been your first priority when you walked in here. Jake felt his cheeks burn with shame. You're absolutely right. The bathroom is down the hall, second door on the left. We'll continue this conversation when you return. Jake blinked in surprise. We will? Did I stutter? Take care of your daughter, Mr. Morrison. Some things matter more than business. When Jake returned with Emma, he found Victoria standing by the window again, but this time her posture was different, less rigid, more thoughtful. Emma's relief was palpable and she seemed more at ease now, though she stayed close to Jake's side. Thank you, Jake said quietly. I should have insisted earlier. Victoria turned from the window. You should have, but I understand desperation makes people do things they normally wouldn't. There was something in her voice that suggested personal experience with the subject. Ms. Harrison, I know I've probably lost any chance at this contract, but I want to say something anyway. Jake took a deep breath. Earlier you mentioned that divorce can be devastating to a man's focus. You were right. 4 years ago, when my marriage ended, I lost more than a wife. I lost my confidence, my financial security, and for a while I lost sight of what really mattered. Victoria remained silent, but Jake sensed she was listening in a way she hadn't been before. But having Emma depend on me taught me something about priorities. Every decision I make, every risk I take, every late night I spend working, it's all filtered through one question. Will this make her life better or worse? Emma looked up at her father with adoring eyes, and something in Victoria's expression softened almost imperceptibly. That's why I can promise you something your other contractors can't. This project won't just be done well. It'll be done with the kind of care you'd give to something that affects your own child's future. Because for me, it does. Victoria returned to her desk and sat down heavily. Mr. Morrison, you present an interesting dilemma. On paper, hiring you would be a significant risk. You're undercapitalized. You lack experience with projects this scale, and frankly, your personal situation suggests you might be a liability. Jake's heart sank, but he maintained eye contact. However, Victoria continued, Randolph Construction has given me nothing but headaches for the past 2 years. Delays, cost overruns, substandard work that had to be redone. They treat my projects like they're doing me a favor by showing up. She picked up a crystal paperweight from her desk, turning it over in her hands as she spoke. Tell me something, Mr. Morrison. What happens if you get in over your head? What happens if the project starts going wrong and you realize you've bitten off more than you can chew? Then I work 18-hour days until I fix it. I bring in additional expertise. I mortgage everything I own to cover overruns. I do whatever it takes because failure isn't an option when your daughter's future is on the line. And if all that still isn't enough? Jake was quiet for a moment, considering the question seriously. Then I fail having given everything I had, but Ms. Harrison, I've been failing for 4 years now. I know what rock bottom looks like, and I know how to claw my way back up. Your other contractors have never been there. They don't know how to fight when everything is on the line. Victoria set down the paperweight and leaned back in her chair. You realize if I give you this contract, I'll be micromanaging every aspect of the project? I don't trust easily, and I certainly don't trust desperate men with $40 million of my money. I wouldn't expect anything less. In fact, I'd welcome the oversight. Having you invested in the project's success would be an asset, not a burden. Emma had been quietly playing with her teddy bear during this exchange, but now she looked up at Victoria with the directness that only children possess. Are you going to help my daddy? Victoria's carefully maintained composure cracked slightly. That's a very complicated question, sweetheart. It doesn't seem complicated, Emma said with 5-year-old logic. He's really good at fixing things. He fixed my dollhouse when it was all broken and now it's prettier than before. Victoria found herself smiling despite the gravity of the situation. Is that so? Emma nodded enthusiastically. He says broken things can be better than new things because you know how strong they are after they've been fixed. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Victoria looked from Emma to Jake, seeing them both clearly for the first time. A man who'd been broken by divorce and financial disaster, but who'd rebuilt himself into someone stronger. A little girl who believed unshakably in her father's ability to fix anything. Mr. Morrison, Victoria said finally, I'm going to make you an offer. Victoria opened her desk drawer and pulled out a contract folder. I'm going to give you a chance to prove yourself, but it won't be the full project. Not initially. Jake's pulse quickened. What do you mean? The downtown renovation has 3 phases. Phase 1 is the structural work and basic systems, essentially preparing the building for the real renovation work. It's worth $8 million and has a 6-month timeline. Victoria slid the folder across the desk toward Jake. Complete Phase 1 on time, on budget, and to my specifications, and you'll get Phase 2 and 3. Fail, and I bring in Randolph to fix your mistakes and finish the job. Jake's hands trembled slightly as he opened the folder. $8 million. It was more money than his company had ever handled, but it was also achievable. More importantly, it was a foothold, a chance to prove himself on a scale that could change everything. There are conditions, Victoria continued. First, you'll provide weekly progress reports directly to me. Second, I'll have my own quality control inspectors on site daily. Third, any cost overruns come out of your profit margin, not my budget. And fourth, Jake sensed there was more. Victoria's smile was sharp again, but not entirely unkind. You'll hire a full-time safety coordinator and maintain insurance coverage that satisfies my legal department. I won't have a desperate contractor cutting corners and getting someone hurt on my project. Jake scanned the contract quickly. The terms were demanding but fair. The timeline was aggressive but achievable. The profit margin was thin but survivable, if everything went perfectly. Ms. Harrison, this is more than generous. It's a real opportunity. Don't thank me yet, Mr. Morrison. Gratitude is premature until you've actually delivered results. Victoria stood and walked around the desk. I'm taking a significant risk on you. Randolph has already begun preliminary work, and I'll have to pay cancellation fees to bring you in instead. Emma tugged on Victoria's sleeve, causing the CEO to look down in surprise. Thank you for helping my daddy, Emma said with heartfelt sincerity. You're not a mean lady after all. Victoria knelt down to Emma's eye level, her expression softer than Jake had seen all afternoon. What makes you think I was mean? Daddy was scared to come here. He only gets scared when he thinks someone might hurt me or him. Victoria glanced up at Jake, who was clearly embarrassed by his daughter's honesty. Your daddy is very brave to come here even when he was scared. Emma nodded sagely. He says brave isn't about not being scared. Brave is about doing important things even when you are scared. Standing back up, Victoria extended her hand to Jake. Mr. Morrison, we have a deal. Don't make me regret it. Jake shook her hand, feeling the firmness of her grip and the weight of the opportunity she was giving him. You won't regret it, Ms. Harrison. I promise you that. Promises are easy, Mr. Morrison. Results are what matter. Victoria returned to her desk and made a note in her calendar. Construction begins Monday. I expect your first progress report by Friday. As Jake gathered up his copies of the contract, Victoria added, And Mr. Morrison, fix your truck. Image matters in this business, whether you like it or not. Jake nodded, then paused at the door. Ms. Harrison, can I ask why you decided to take a chance on me? Victoria was quiet for a moment, looking past Jake and Emma toward the window that overlooked the city. Sometimes broken things really can be stronger once they're repaired properly. We'll see if that applies to contractors as well as dollhouses. As they walked toward the elevator, Emma skipped beside her father, her earlier discomfort forgotten in the excitement of the moment. Daddy, are we going to be okay now? Jake looked down at his daughter, then back at the gleaming office where Victoria Harrison was already on the phone, presumably arranging the cancellation of Randolph Construction's contract. $8 million, 6 months, everything he'd worked for, everything he'd lost, everything Emma's future depended on. It all came down to the next 6 months. Yeah, sweetheart, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I think we're going to be more than okay. The elevator doors closed, and Jake Morrison descended toward the lobby, toward his broken-down truck, toward the challenge that would either save his life or destroy what little he had left. But for the first time in 4 years, he felt something he'd almost forgotten: hope. Outside, the December rain had stopped, and the first hints of winter sunlight were breaking through the clouds. 3 months into the project, Jake Morrison stood in the skeletal frame of what would become the downtown district's crown jewel, watching his crew install the last of the structural steel beams. The March morning was crisp, and steam rose from his coffee cup as he reviewed the day's schedule. Everything was running like clockwork, 2 weeks ahead of schedule and 3% under budget. His phone buzzed with a text from Emma's school. Emma won first place in the science fair. She's so excited to tell you. Jake smiled, remembering the volcano project they'd worked on together last weekend. For the first time in years, he'd been able to buy her all the supplies she needed without checking his bank balance twice. The steady paycheck from the Harrison project had transformed their lives in ways both large and small. Boss, we've got a problem. Jake turned to see Marcus Thompson, his electrical subcontractor, approaching with a grim expression. Marcus had been in the business for 20 years and wasn't easily rattled, which made his current demeanor particularly concerning. What kind of problem? Marcus led Jake to the building's main electrical room, where bundles of cable snaked through conduits toward the new distribution panels. Take a look at this. Jake knelt down to examine the area Marcus indicated. Behind one of the panels, the original 1920s wiring had been exposed during demolition. But this wasn't the cloth-wrapped copper he'd expected to find. Instead, there were modern cables, clearly installed within the last decade. Someone's been using this building, Marcus said quietly. And I mean recently. These cables are feeding power to something and it's not coming from the city grid. Jake's stomach tightened. How recently? The installation work is maybe 5-6 years old, but the wear patterns on these cables suggest they've been carrying significant load until very recently, like maybe up until we started work 3 months ago. Jake stood, his mind racing through the implications. An abandoned building with recent electrical work meant someone had been using the space for something they didn't want the city to know about. The possibilities ranged from harmless storage to something much more serious. Have you told anyone else about this? Just my guy Tony, and he knows to keep his mouth shut. But Jake, if the city inspectors see this, they're going to have questions we can't answer. Jake's phone rang. Victoria Harrison's name appeared on the screen. Jake, I need you to meet me at the site immediately. Victoria's voice was tense. We have a situation. I'm already here. What kind of situation? The kind that could shut down our project permanently. I'll be there in 15 minutes. The line went dead, leaving Jake staring at his phone. In 3 months of working together, Victoria had never sounded that shaken. Their professional relationship had evolved from mutual suspicion to grudging respect, and Jake had begun to think the worst obstacles were behind them. Marcus was watching him carefully. Bad news? Potentially catastrophic news. Marcus, I need you to document everything you found, but don't touch anything else. And keep your crew away from this area until we figure out what we're dealing with. Victoria's black Mercedes pulled up to the construction site exactly 15 minutes later, followed by a second car Jake didn't recognize. Victoria emerged from her vehicle looking like she'd aged 5 years since their last meeting. The man from the second car was tall, gray-haired, and carried himself with the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. Jake, this is Detective Ray Sullivan with the State Police. Detective Sullivan, Jake Morrison, the contractor I mentioned. Detective Sullivan's handshake was firm, his eyes sharp and assessing. Mr. Morrison, I understand you're in charge of this renovation project. That's right. Ms. Harrison, what's going on? Victoria's face was pale. Jake, this building wasn't as empty as we thought. It's been used as a distribution center for a drug operation. A major drug operation. The words hit Jake like a physical blow. Are you certain? Detective Sullivan answered. We've been tracking this organization for 2 years. Last week we finally got a break, arrested one of their mid-level operators, and he gave us locations in exchange for a reduced sentence. This building was their primary warehouse. Jake felt his legs go weak. 3 months of work, Everything he'd built, Emma's future, all of it suddenly in jeopardy because he'd unknowingly stumbled into someone else's criminal enterprise. "Detective," Jake managed, "my crew and I had no knowledge of any illegal activity. We're just doing renovation work. I believe you, Mr. Morrison. But that doesn't solve our problem. This site is now part of an active criminal investigation, which means the project stops immediately," Victoria finished, her voice hollow. Jake looked around at his crew, who were continuing their work obliviously. These men had families, mortgages, responsibilities. More importantly, shutting down the project would destroy everything Jake had rebuilt over the past 3 months. "How long will the investigation take?" Jake asked. "Months, potentially," Detective Sullivan replied. "We need to process the entire building as a crime scene, interview everyone who's worked here, trace the financial connections. It's not a quick process." Victoria was staring at the building with an expression Jake had never seen before. Defeat. "Jake, I'm sorry. I know how much this project means to you, but I can't have Harrison Industries associated with a criminal investigation. The negative publicity alone could cost us other contracts." "But we're victims here," Jake protested. "We didn't know about any drug operation." "It doesn't matter what we knew," Victoria said sadly. "It matters what the media reports and what our clients believe." Detective Sullivan spent the next 2 hours interviewing Jake and his crew while Victoria paced the construction trailer like a caged animal. The detective's questions were thorough but not accusatory. It was clear he believed Jake's assertion that they'd had no knowledge of the building's previous use. "Mr. Morrison," Detective Sullivan said as he closed his notebook, "I want to be clear about something. You and your crew are not suspects. You're witnesses and potentially victims of circumstance. But that doesn't change the fact that this site is now evidence in a federal case." Jake nodded numbly. "What happens to the construction equipment? The materials we've already purchased?" "Everything stays exactly where it is until we complete our investigation. Nothing can be moved or altered." Victoria had been silent during the interview, but now she spoke up. "Detective, is there any possibility of expediting the investigation? This project represents a significant investment, and the delays will cost both Mr. Morrison and my company substantial amounts of money." Detective Sullivan's expression was sympathetic but firm. "Ms. Harrison, I understand the financial implications, but this case involves a drug distribution network that was moving millions of dollars worth of narcotics through multiple states. The investigation takes precedence over commercial concerns." After the detective left, Jake and Victoria stood in awkward silence outside the construction trailer. The March wind had picked up, sending dust and debris swirling around the site that had represented hope just hours earlier. "Jake," Victoria said finally, "I want you to know how sorry I am about this. If there was any way to continue the project, I would." "I know." Jake's voice was hoarse with exhaustion and disappointment. "Victoria, can I ask you something?" She nodded. "Why did you really give me this chance 3 months ago? I've been thinking about it, and nothing about my situation should have inspired confidence." Victoria was quiet for a long moment, looking at the building that had become their shared monument to bad luck. "My father was a contractor. Small operation just like yours. When I was Emma's age, he took on a project that was supposed to save our family business." Jake waited, sensing there was more. The project went bad. Not his fault. The client had financial problems and couldn't pay, but Dad had extended himself too far, borrowed against everything we owned to finance the materials and labor. When the client defaulted, we lost everything. The house, the business, Dad's tools, everything. What happened to your family? Dad never recovered. The shame of failing, of losing everything his father had built. It broke something inside him. He spent the last 10 years of his life working for other contractors, never able to get back on his feet. Mom worked 2 jobs just to keep us afloat. Victoria wiped her eyes quickly, clearly uncomfortable with the emotion. "When you walked into my office with Emma talking about second chances and proving yourself, I saw my father. I saw the man he could have been if someone had given him the opportunity to rebuild." Jake felt a surge of understanding. "And now you're watching history repeat itself. Worse. At least my father's failure was just bad luck and bad timing. This feels like the universe playing a cruel joke." Jake's phone rang. Emma's school number appeared on the screen. "Mr. Morrison?" The voice belonged to Mrs. Peterson, Emma's teacher. "I'm calling because Emma seems upset about something. She keeps asking if you're in trouble. Did something happen at work today?" Jake closed his eyes. Emma was incredibly perceptive, and she'd probably sensed his mood when he'd called to congratulate her on the science fair victory. "Mrs. Peterson, Can you put Emma on the phone? Daddy? Emma's small voice was tight with worry. Are you okay? You sounded sad when we talked. I'm fine, sweetheart, just having a challenging day at work. How was the science fair celebration? It was good, but I kept thinking about you. Daddy? Are we going to be okay? The question cut through Jake like a knife. For 3 months, Emma had seemed lighter, happier, more secure, now that security was evaporating, and she could feel it even from across the city. We're going to be fine, Emma. I promise. Do you need me to bring you my lucky penny? The one Grandpa gave me? Jake's throat tightened. No, sweetheart. You keep the lucky penny. I love you, and I'll see you tonight. After ending the call, Jake found Victoria watching him with a mixture of sympathy and something else. Determination. Jake, I have an idea. It's unconventional, and it might not work, but I think we should try it. I'm listening. What if we don't wait for the investigation to be completed? What if we find a way to continue the project at a different location? Jake stared at her. Move the entire renovation project? There are 3 other buildings in the downtown area that would work for mixed-use development. None of them have the historical significance of our original choice, but they could serve the same economic development purpose. Victoria, that would mean starting completely over. New permits, new plans, new everything. The timeline would be impossible. Not necessarily. I've been thinking about expansion anyway, and I already own 2 of those buildings. We could begin work immediately while the lawyers sort out the contracts. Jake felt a flicker of hope, followed immediately by skepticism. Why would you do that? You could just walk away from this entire situation and work with a different contractor on a new project. Victoria's smile was small but genuine. Because broken things can be stronger after they're properly repaired. You taught me that. Or rather, Emma did. This would be a massive financial risk for you. Jake, I'm worth $50 million. I didn't get there by playing it safe. Besides, over the past 3 months, I've watched you work. I've seen your attention to detail, your dedication, the way you treat your crew. You've earned the right to finish what we started. Jake felt tears threatening. Victoria, I don't know what to say. Say yes. Say you're willing to fight for this because I am. Within 48 hours, Victoria had assembled a team of lawyers, architects, and city planners to evaluate the feasibility of relocating the project. The building she'd selected was a 1930s office complex 6 blocks from the original site, smaller than their first choice, but structurally sound and immediately available. Jake spent those same 48 hours in a blur of activity, reviewing new building plans, coordinating with his subcontractors, and trying to manage the emotional whiplash of losing everything and then getting it back. Emma seemed to sense the renewed energy in their household, and her smile returned as Jake's confidence rebuilt itself. Daddy, are you happy again? She asked over breakfast on Friday morning. Getting there, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups have to solve really complicated problems, but I think we found a solution. Emma nodded sagely. Like when my Lego castle fell down and we built a better one? Exactly like that. Jake's phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Meet me at the new site at 9 a.m. Bring your hard hat and your optimism. When Jake arrived at the new building, he found Victoria already there, standing in the empty lobby with an architect and a city planning official. The space was different from their original choice. More modern, less historical character, but it had good bones and excellent natural light. Jake, meet Sandra Chen, our architect, and Tom Brady, the city planning coordinator. They've been working all night on preliminary assessments. Sandra, an energetic woman in her 40s, spread blueprints across a makeshift table. Jake, Victoria's told me about your vision for mixed-use development. This building actually offers some advantages over your original choice. She pointed to various areas of the plans. Better parking, more flexible floor plans, and the electrical and plumbing infrastructure is much more modern. We could actually complete the renovation faster and with fewer complications. Tom Brady, a heavy-set man with 20 years of city planning experience, was equally optimistic. The zoning is already approved for mixed use, and since Ms. Harrison owns the building, we can fast-track the permit process. You could begin work as early as next week. Jake studied the plans, his contractor's eye assessing the scope of work required. The structural modifications would be simpler. The system's integration would be cleaner, and the timeline could be compressed to 4 months instead of 6. Victoria smiled. So you're interested? I'm more than interested. Victoria, this could actually be better than our original project. Sandra rolled out another set of drawings. I've been thinking about the retail space configuration. If we open up these interior walls and create a more flowing layout, we could increase the leasable square footage by 15%, without increasing construction costs. Jake's excitement grew as he examined Sandra's modifications. And if we raise the ceiling height in the main retail area, we could add a mezzanine level for specialty shops or office space. Exactly, Sandra said. The building's structural design can support the additional load without major reinforcement. Tom Brady checked his notes. I can have preliminary permits ready by Monday morning. Full permits should be approved within 2 weeks. Assuming no complications. Victoria looked around the empty lobby, her business mind clearly engaged. Jake, what would be your timeline for completing the core construction? 4 months for structural work, systems, and basic finishes. Another month for tenant improvements and final details. We could have the first retail tenants moving in by September. And the budget? Jake pulled out his phone and ran quick calculations based on what he'd learned from the first project. $6 million for the core construction, another $1 million for finishes and tenant improvements. Total project cost of $7 million versus the $8 million budget for phase 1 of the original project. Victoria's smile widened. Gentlemen, ladies, I think we have a new project. Over the next week, Jake threw himself into the planning process with an energy he hadn't felt since before his divorce. The new project felt different from the beginning. Cleaner, more focused, less burdened by the weight of desperation. He was no longer fighting just to survive. He was building something meaningful. Emma's bedtime routine became project planning sessions, with Jake showing her the building plans and explaining how empty spaces would be transformed into stores and offices and homes. Will people be happy there? Emma asked one evening as they looked at Sandra's latest drawings. I think so. Sweetheart, we're creating places where people can work and shop and live. When you do that well, it makes people happy. Emma studied the plans with the seriousness of a 5-year-old conducting important research. Daddy, are you going to make it beautiful? We're going to make it better than beautiful. We're going to make it perfect. The following Monday, Jake stood in the lobby of the new building with his crew, everyone energized by the fresh start and the improved working conditions. The building's modern infrastructure meant fewer complications, and the streamlined design meant faster progress. Victoria stopped by the site daily, but her involvement felt different now, less like surveillance and more like collaboration. She'd begun bringing coffee for the crew, asking detailed questions about the work, and occasionally offering suggestions that actually improved the construction process. Jake, she said one afternoon as they walked through the partially renovated retail space, I want to ask you something personal. Okay, what happened to Emma's mother? I know you've been divorced for 4 years, but Emma never mentions her. Jake was quiet for a moment, considering how much to share. Sarah left when the business started struggling. She said she couldn't handle the uncertainty, the financial pressure, the long hours I was working trying to keep everything together. That must have been devastating. The divorce was hard, but losing Emma's mother was worse. Sarah doesn't visit, doesn't call, doesn't send birthday cards. Emma pretends it doesn't matter. But sometimes I catch her watching other kids with their mothers, and I can see the sadness in her eyes. Victoria nodded thoughtfully. Children are remarkably resilient, but they shouldn't have to be. No, they shouldn't. That's why this project means so much to me. I want Emma to see that her father doesn't give up, that he can build something lasting and meaningful. Victoria stopped walking and turned to face him. Jake, you've already built something lasting and meaningful. You've built a relationship with your daughter based on love and commitment and reliability. The construction projects are just work. What you've created with Emma is everything. 2 months into the new project, Jake received a phone call that changed everything. He was reviewing electrical plans in the construction trailer when Detective Sullivan's name appeared on his phone screen. Mr. Morrison, I have some news about the original building investigation. Good news or bad news? Both, actually. The good news is that we've wrapped up the evidence collection, and the building will be released back to Ms. Harrison within the next week. Jake's heart rate increased. And the bad news? During our investigation, we uncovered some financial records that show the drug operation was paying rent to someone who knew exactly what was happening in that building. Jake sat down heavily in his chair. Who? That's where it gets complicated. The payments were going to a company called Harrison Development Group. The words hit Jake like a punch to the stomach. Detective, are you saying Victoria knew about the drug operation? I'm saying someone at Harrison Industries was receiving monthly payments from a known drug trafficking organization. Whether Ms. Harrison knew personally is something we're still investigating. Jake's mind raced through the implications. If Victoria had known about the drug operation, then everything about their relationship had been built on lies. Worse, It would mean he'd been manipulated by someone who'd put his crew and his project at risk for financial gain. Detective Sullivan, what exactly are you asking me to do? I need to know if Ms. Harrison ever said anything to you about the building's previous use. Any comments about why it